World Rugby is finally having the conversation that could reshape international rugby as we know it. The sport's power brokers are planning crunch talks in London for what's being called the first credible attempt in 3 decades to align the Northern and Southern Hemisphere calendars. Leading the charge from the south, former Argentina scrum-half Agustín Pichot, and the bloke who's been banging this drum the loudest, Springboks boss Rassie Erasmus. Let's be honest, rugby's calendar has been a mess since the game went professional in 1995. While football sorted out their international windows fairly quickly, rugby has been running 2 completely separate seasons for 3 decades. The Six Nations kicks off in February, the Rugby Championship starts in August, Northern Hemisphere clubs play through winter, Super Rugby Pacific runs through the southern summer. It's like trying to organise a global dinner party where half the guests eat breakfast and the other half eat supper. Erasmus spelled it out pretty clearly. He reckons it would be brilliant if the Rugby Championship ran at the same time as the Six Nations. His logic is proper straightforward. No more situations where some countries are peaking in June while others are flat. Then the whole thing flips in November. Law changes could roll out across the board simultaneously. Everyone would know exactly where they stand. The Springboks coach isn't just throwing ideas at the wall either. He's been thinking about this tactically, understanding that alignment means better preparation, better player management, and ultimately better test rugby. The proposal being discussed is intriguing. Shift the Rugby Championship to run alongside the Six Nations, with the European tournament potentially starting a fortnight later than usual. At first glance, it sounds simple, but anyone who's been around rugby long enough knows nothing in this sport happens without a proper scrap over details. The biggest obstacle, Super Rugby Pacific. Moving that competition to accommodate an earlier Rugby Championship isn't just about shifting some dates around. There are broadcasting contracts worth millions already signed and sealed. Then there's the small matter of competing with Australian rules football, cricket, and the NRL for eyeballs and stadium attendance in the Southern Hemisphere. These aren't minor considerations, they're the kind of commercial realities that have killed alignment talks before they've even properly started. But here's the thing that's different now. South African franchises are already playing in the United Rugby Championship and European competitions. The Bulls, Stormers, Sharks and Lions are going toe-to-toe with Leinster, Munster, Leicester and the rest week in, week out. That alignment has already happened at club level, which makes international alignment less of a radical leap and more of a logical next step. Think about what this would mean for player availability. Right now, blokes playing in Europe miss out on representing their Pacific Island nations during the Pacific Nations Cup because it clashes with European club commitments. Argentina and South Africa have players scattered across multiple hemispheres, essentially playing 12 months a year with barely a break. New Zealand and Australia lose control of their European-based players during key preparation periods. It's absolute madness when you actually stop and consider it. If everything ran in sync, suddenly Tier 2 nations get access to their best players. Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, Georgia, Japan. These countries have quality operators earning their living in the Premiership, Top 14 and United Rugby Championship. Imagine those nations at full strength, consistently. That's not just good for those countries, that's good for the entire international game because it raises the competitive level across the board. Mate, if you're finding this breakdown interesting so far, give us a subscribe at Rugby Chopper. Helps us keep producing, cheers. The tactical implications are worth examining too. Right now, Northern and Southern Hemisphere teams operate on completely different cycles. When the Six Nations sides are in peak condition after months of hard club rugby, the Rugby Championship teams are just coming off their off-season. By the time November internationals roll around, the All Blacks, Springboks and Wallabies are match-hardened from the Rugby Championship, while the Six Nations teams are still finding their feet in the club season. It creates an uneven playing field that nobody really benefits from. Alignment would level that out. Everyone peaks at the same time. Everyone deals with the same player workload issues simultaneously. Law variations get tested under the same conditions across all competitions. Take the 20-minute red card discussion that's been ongoing between hemispheres. The South has been more open to it, the North more cautious. With aligned calendars, you could trial these changes globally in real time, get proper data, and make informed decisions that work for everyone. The financial side cannot be ignored either. Broadcasting rights are the lifeblood of professional rugby. Right now, networks in different hemispheres are bidding for different products at different times of the year. Alignment could potentially create a more streamlined, valuable global product. Imagine if the best international rugby in both hemispheres happened simultaneously. The commercial possibilities are considerable, which means more money flowing into the game at all levels. But this isn't just about money and logistics. There's a human element here that matters. Players are knackered. The current calendar has blokes playing 40+ games a year with minimal rest. Injuries are mounting. Careers are getting shorter. Coaches are managing player minutes like they're rationing wartime supplies. Something has to give, and alignment could be part of the solution by creating clearer rest periods and more sustainable playing schedules. Pichot leading these discussions is significant. The former Los Pumas scrum-half knows both sides of the divide intimately. He played in Europe, captained Argentina, and served as vice-chairman of World Rugby. He understands the politics, the commercial pressures, and the rugby realities. He's not coming in green or naive about what's required to make this happen. His experience gives him credibility that few others in World Rugby can match. The talks are bringing together decision makers from all the major nations. These are the people who can actually make this happen, assuming they can find common ground. Past attempts have failed because too many parties had too much to lose. Broadcasting deals, domestic competitions, player welfare, commercial partnerships. The competing interests have always been too strong. This time feels different though. The landscape has shifted. South African teams competing in Europe has proven that cross-hemisphere competition can work commercially and logistically. The pandemic forced rugby to become more flexible with scheduling and showed that traditional models can be challenged. Player welfare concerns are louder than ever, making the status quo harder to defend. And crucially, you've got influential voices like Erasmus publicly backing change. The English Premiership, French Top 14, and United Rugby Championship would all need to be on board. These competitions have their own commercial imperatives and aren't going to sacrifice their product for the good of international rugby without serious negotiation. The same goes for Super Rugby Pacific. Getting all these entities to agree on a unified approach has historically been like herding cats, blind cats, in a storm, yet the prize is worth the effort. Imagine a rugby calendar where test matches mean the same thing globally, where Tier 2 nations can consistently field their strongest sides, where law changes are implemented universally and tested fairly, where players have clearer rest periods and more sustainable careers, where broadcasters can market a truly global product. That's not fantasy, that's what alignment could deliver if everyone can park their individual interests long enough to see the bigger picture. The devil will be in the details, naturally. Which competitions move? Who compromises on dates? How do broadcasting contracts get renegotiated? These are the questions that will dominate any serious discussions about calendar alignment. Nobody's pretending this will be easy, but there seems to be genuine willingness to tackle these questions head-on rather than kicking them into touch. For supporters, the benefits are pretty clear. Better quality international rugby because teams are on equal footing preparation-wise. The question ultimately comes down to whether rugby's various power brokers can think beyond their immediate interests. Can European clubs accept slight scheduling changes if it benefits the international game? Can Sanzar nations find a way to move Super Rugby without destroying its commercial viability? 3 decades of professional rugby has been run on a calendar that made sense in the amateur era but increasingly looks outdated in the modern game. Players are assets worth millions. Broadcasting deals run into hundreds of millions. Getting this right matters not just for the current generation, but for the future health of the game itself. So here's the real question. Is rugby finally ready to organise itself like a proper global sport? Or will competing interests once again pull the game in different directions, leaving us with more decades of misaligned calendars and missed opportunities? The conversation is happening with serious people at the table, and that alone represents progress worth acknowledging, don't you think? Cheers, mate. Have a good one.